See, for me, he was always kind of like a cool uncle in punk rock. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like he was always the guy, like you
I agree
said,
with that.
super tatted, had this sort of like just looked like whiskey would just shoot out of his pores the way he walked around and stuff like that. Just looked like sort of a almost a cliche of like a punk, like just a straight up punk dude. And then
What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review Podcast with Rob and I. This is episode 100, man. Like, it's crazy how fast that goes by. Like, we've been doing this for about a year together, maybe a little longer even. But I've had some guests in between, and it just really expedited the numbers, man. It was like, tick, 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 tick. And I did, in the last couple of months, I've been doing like 3 a week because I've had people that were fixing to go on tour is really what it was. Hit me up and like, yeah, I'm ready. If you got some time, I'm like, oh, shit, all right. I don't ever say no. So I'm sitting here, ooh, buddy, man. But last night I did a 3.5 hour stream, dude. I'm still toasted from that.
jeez, yeah.
Yeah, and then I did a 2 hour stream today covering the Bombs record so I could listen to it and do it, like knock out 2 things at once. But yeah, how's your day going, man? You're out of school for the year, as far as your normal school year, but you said you picked up a part-time gig or something?
Yeah, doing a little bit of summer work to keep me on my toes, but kind of excited to sort of kick back and dig into like this stuff that we're going to be talking about and really dig in going forward. We got some heavy hitters in the next couple of weeks too, where we need to hunker down because we got to bring our best stuff.
Bro, we're doing so in the next like 2 weeks. We have these 4 albums are going to be talked about on this channel. Operation Ivy's album, the Suicide Machines' Destruction by Definition, the Suicide Machines' Battle Hymns, and freaking Rancid Let's Go. Because they're all, well, the Rancid stuff's hitting major anniversaries, and then the Suicide Machines are just really great companion records with those. But like, what? First off, those are all bangers, like certified ridiculous. Like, I love every one of those very much. But yeah, oh, and if you're here and you're just joining us, please go to my channel, check out The Origins of Street Punk, A Brief History and Bands You Need to Know. I worked on that the video for legit like 2 months, not solid or anything, but 2 months it took me to make that video. It took me a lot of editing, and I actually lost all the footage at one point through a like power thing happening at my house. I don't really know how it happened, but it was a lot of work. It's doing very well with the numbers and the metrics and everything, but I just want everybody to know that I would really appreciate it if you'd go watch that. Throw me a like or a dislike, feedback, positive or negative. I want to know what you're thinking about it. I'd love to have your input, and I got more coming. We're going to do Indonesian street punk is coming up next, and I really, really like the music that comes out of that part of the world, so I'm looking forward to learning some more about it and talking about bands that most of us are not very familiar with. So
that Indonesian one's gonna be fun. That's like a hotbed of punk rock.
Dude, it like freaking is, man. It's kind of crazy, actually. Like when I started like learning about it, I was like, okay, I didn't know that we had so much going on over there. But all right, and they're good, dude. But a bunch of the bands are like these weird rancid worship bands that have like, it's just like the America has like Ramones core. Over in Indonesia, they're like 20 years behind, so they have Rancid core, like it's legit, and they have bands that have these like weird amalgamation songs of like Rancid melodies and stuff mixed in with their own stuff. It's awesome, man. I really love it, and the production quality is like shockingly good. So yeah, tonight we're talking about US Bombs the World. It is about to hit or just hit its, I think, 25th anniversary. And then we're doing Weezer Blue Album, 30 years, punk adjacent record. And boy, do I have a lot to talk about with that record. So we're going to start off with the US Bombs the World. Yeah, let me look something up real quick. Let's see. Did you get a chance to listen to that at all, Rob?
Yeah. I listened to it a couple of times. I'd heard this album a few times over the years and had heard the songs in and out. I'm not the biggest US Bombs fan, I more think of them as a band like that I saw on Warped Tour that I used to listen to on comps that I've always kind of liked, but not the biggest fan of. And listening to this album, it's a really solid album of what they do well. They're this band
Right.
that really presents a hard edge, but they're pretty. Their songs themselves aren't necessarily super. Let's say ugly the way that they sort of like present
Right.
themselves. You know what I mean? It's pretty tight. Good punk rock with the rock and roll edge. You were saying earlier about that Indonesian stuff being rancid core. This is kind of like, I would say, I was going to use that term rancid core, but really just the all that Hellcat sound. We talked a couple weeks ago when we had the Dropkick Murphys album from the Hellcat days, and it's like very similar to this. There's a lot of songs that have that sort of same
Really? Okay.
tone. Yeah. I think you can see that sort of like the Hellcat, the chanty. I think you would refer to it as sort of that kind of oi bass or that like
Well, this is a very
yeah.
77 punk style
Yeah,
sound. Like it's
that with
Sex
the
Pistols started the sound where this comes from.
that with like the classic rock kind of a little bit
Right.
infused into it.
Yeah.
Is,
Yeah. I can hear that.
is what you got going on here with some 1999 stylings and fixings on it. I think we forget that a lot of these bands, we don't think of Hellcat as that big of a label because really it's the imprint on Epitaph. But for a lot of bands like the U.S. Bombs, the biggest they were ever going to get is being on a label like Hellcat. So this was kind of
Absolutely.
as slick as they were really going to be. And they were, this stuff is fairly presentable. Much more so when you listen to it than when you look at it. And I think a lot of the Hellcat stuff carries that connotation with it.
Well, that's that like 77 style punk, and that also that like Swing and Utters brand of street punk is exactly what this is. And I'm a little older than you, and I also was a heavy skateboarder and like partier. So like I resonated with Dwayne Peters in ways that maybe you didn't. I don't know, but I feel like there's some things where we had in common that maybe you and him don't. And like just like that heavily tattooed skater, like troublemaker, just. I don't know what to call it other than that, but we have a lot in common. He and I was, fortunate enough to get my life together and all that. But Dwayne Peters is having a rough time right now. He's not a perfect person, but I feel bad for the man. I wish I could help him in some way.
Yeah, he's I think like if you want to say a word to describe him, it's troubled. Like he's clearly troubled.
Very.
If you look at how where his life has taken him. See, for me, he was always kind of like a cool uncle in punk rock. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was always the guy, like you said.
I agree with that.
Super tatted, had this sort of like just looked like whiskey would just shoot out of his pores the way he walked around and stuff like that. Just looked like sort of a almost a cliche of like a punk, like just a straight up punk dude. And then he was very he never found a microphone. He didn't say yes to. It seemed like he was always doing interviews and stuff like that. So he was very visible. That's why I think of all. He's really known, I think, on the F Word doc because he has a really powerful scene, obviously, throughout that. But even like when I was a kid, I remember I had the Filth and the Fury, which is the Sex Pistols doc, and it comes with like a little supplement on there, and they interview a whole bunch of people. And sure enough, Dwayne Peters is on there being interviewed. He's kind of the centerpiece of that. He was kind of like Keith Morris in that time period where he would just always be talking to people. So he really got himself out there. He really this is a band that. Very frontman centric. He's one of the
very much so
the cult of personalities of punk rock. He's one of those figures. He's not the biggest guy. He's on the level of guys like like a Fat Mike or a Johnny Rotten or any of those guys. But they're very much a personality fronted band.
Yeah, I got a lot of my stage presence and banter from him. Honestly, like the way that I moved on stage was very akin to the way Dwayne Peters was. And I met him a couple times. He was on Junk both times, I think, and. Not very nice to talk to, but look, dude, I'm the last to throw stones. I understand what he was going through mentally at that point based on my experiences. So he would never, there would be no chance he would ever remember talking to me much. I don't know if he'd even remember the venue he was at, you know what I'm saying? So, but I really like the band. And like you said, they're visually incredibly rough and abrasive, but audibly and sonically great music, great catchy songwriting, very good guitar work. I love the snare drum sound through this whole record. The production, I really can't find anywhere where they tell you who the producer of the record is, which I think is kind of wild. But yeah, he lost his son to a car crash in I think 2007 or 8 or something like that. And that probably turned him further left when he might have been veering towards like kind of getting his shit together. Because I know back then he was doing more projects, and as far as I knew back then, he was kind of getting his life together.
Yeah, he seemed like he was just another old guy in punk back then. You know what I mean?
Right, and
He
then that
just seemed,
happened, and he just kind of went
well,
kadoosh, you
yeah, because
know?
it would always be like he's missing or something like that, or there's a domestic dispute. It was always like something for years and years and years and years, and then it seems like he's kind of not playing with a full deck right now. With everything he's got going, it's sad. It's just, I mean, I don't want to say it's even predictable because there's a lot of these guys that go through a lot of hardship or doing a lot of things, but that he's kind of been a unique case where you see a guy like Mike Ness who was just as strung out and all this stuff and has lived 40 years and has been able to turn that around. It's sad that some of these guys.
Well, I mean, Mike
stuck
Ness
in
is
it.
dealing with like cancer and stuff now, and that's probably coming from the way he lived as well. I mean, Dwayne Peters, but I mean, like yeah, I mean, they're different people, man, like super, super different. I understand your point, but their personalities were going to take them different ways just because how different they were. So when they got put in these situations, I think Mike Ness was more like, I got to get out of here. And Dwayne Peters kind of just embraced the chaos. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was a professional skater and he got a lot of money at an early, well, not a lot. He got some money at an early age, and then he just went straight into punk rock. And like, he was known already when he got into punk music because he was a pro skater. So people already like, oh, this dude's, I've seen him on Thrasher. I've seen him doing crazy pool skating and stuff. I mean, now he's like living out of a van, selling all his personal stuff. I've tried to contact him multiple times. I'm willing to compensate him for an interview. I'm not going to be like, there's $1,000, but I'll hook the dude up with a night at a hotel or a meal or something. Like, I would like to just talk to the guy and just honestly check in with him and see how he's doing. I would love to hear stories or whatever, man. He's a guy I grew up with, and I hear some pretty negative stuff about him occasionally, and it does break my heart, kind of, man. I feel people are real easy to dismiss troubled people because they're trouble. They're not just troubled. They're trouble. They're hard to deal with. They're hard to work with and whatnot. And so it's sad. But as far as U.S. Bombs the World, that album, bro, it was one of the ones that I just Googled it and my video came up. That's really weird. I was trying to find out who produced it. Anybody that knows who produced this album, please tell me. I've actually Googled who produced it and didn't get an answer.
I assume it's probably just Dwayne and then maybe Tim.
The reason I even brought it up is because when I was listening to it earlier, I was listening to it very loud and on a live stream, and also I was like really into it, not doing other things around the house. Bro, it sounds like Tim Armstrong, and so I was trying to find out if it was Tim, but
yeah, I would assume so. I mean, I don't know. And Tim, I think as a label head, is probably pretty hands off in terms of
for sure.
In terms of dictating. I mean, obviously he's got a lot of influence, but I would assume it was that.
Lars did a bunch of stuff on Hellcat too, so I thought maybe one of those guys did it.
Yeah, I feel like though, if had it have been one of those other guys, it would have been credited though. So I'm not saying that from
That's a good point.
Information. So that's just a leaning. It's probably unproduced ultimately. You know what I mean?
That's true. Have you seen that movie Suburbia?
Years ago, yeah.
So I haven't seen it in a while. I've got a copy of it. I haven't watched it in a while, but I'm going to now because somebody told me on the live stream that Joe Schmo, who's in that movie Suburbia, is actually the bass player on this record, which I thought was really cool information.
Yeah, they use a lot of most of the actors in there are just people from
bands. Yeah, that's a really good movie
from that time period. Yeah.
Man, I got something in my freaking eye. It will not go away. Yeah, it's a movie that I've watched a couple times when I was younger. It's been a while. It's a grimy movie. It's Another State of Mind is also one of those movies that's like you got to watch it, but it's really kind of hard to get through. It's real grimy, lo-fi, low quality footage, bad sound.
Another State of Mind is pretty misleading too. The way it presents a lot of stuff. We were trying to figure out. Remember a few weeks ago what BYO was known for, and it was for Another State of Mind. That was the big.
Oh shit! Really?
The better youth organization. Yeah.
Interesting.
Youth Brigade was the big band that they were always. That was like that, and that movie was meant to.
I never put that together.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. So there's a few songs on this record that are absolutely amazing. Let me pull up my Spotify. So okay. just the notes I wrote, it wasn't a lot. I like that they have stuff like harmonica and piano on this record, and it's still like super punk rock. But the clarity in the recording is just honestly, man, it was surprising. Like it was a very clean record as far as the sound. I didn't have anything where I was like, that sounds like shit. Nah, the whole record sounds really really pretty. Skater Dater, um, amazing song. Billy Club. It's about the kind of man that goes out and becomes a cop. Maybe I'm not understanding, but it's what it sounds like. Yeah, that song. Who does that, man? Who wakes up and goes, I want to be a cop? You got to be a certain kind of asshole to want to do that, I think. In my personal opinion. I'm gonna have a bunch of cops in the comments like, dude, you're the asshole, sir. I'm not even saying you're wrong, guys.
And the guys who came for the Dropkick Murphys video, they're all mad. They're all offended now.
So you know what? It wouldn't even shock me. Let me pull up my. I have a little playlist on here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there we go. Personal mix. Where's these songs at? Here they are. Okay, so there's 4 songs that I really really like on this record, but there's one that really stands out. So we got Skater Dater, New Approach, Checkpoint. But the song on here is Joe's Tune. That song is so good. It's like Chuck Berry. What's his name that did Great Balls of Fire?
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, and the Sex Pistols got together and wrote like a rockin' bar punk rock pub song. It's so good. It's so good with that crazy rock and roll piano style. Man, that's actually what got me interested in the sounds of the piano was songs like this, and obviously Jerry Lee Lewis style music from back in the 50s and 60s. But that kind of rock and roll really interested me. Was there any songs that stuck out to you?
Yeah, so I've always, and I think this was on like a comp or something, but "Bomb's Not Food" was the
song.
one that has always kind of stood out to me. I have "Skater Dater" as well,
Yeah.
as long as "Hoboken Dreams." I like when this
good man.
I like when this album kind of slows it down too. There's a lot of like slower type of songs on this album. Again, that you don't necessarily associate it. Like a lot of this album isn't very like fast and in your face. Although there is a lot of songs. I also have isolated ones written down, kind of, and it starts at a little bouncy, kind of like Ramonesy, and then goes into their style. And then I have Checkpoint as the last one that I have written down. If I have a criticism, maybe the album is a little long, so it's got a lot of songs on it. It's 49 minutes too in total.
That is kind of long.
Yeah, and it doesn't drag. Like I don't think it's not one of those ones that's drawn out, but I do think these are fairly full songs, and so there is a lot of them on there. Again, this would not matter when it was released in 1999. I don't think that it was that long. I'm judging it a little bit on a modern curve, but that did stand out to me a little bit when I was going through this one. But really, the musicality kind of stuck out to me, and like you were saying, how clean it was, and how some of these parts are kind of dreary and stuff that you would associate not necessarily on something that wasn't punk, but even with Hellcat, like I associate Hellcat more, like you were saying, with that kind of rock style, with that rock and roll style, or with a ska type style or a rockabilly style. I don't really associate that label as much with the elaborate music, and there's a lot of little hints of that sort of snuck in on this record, and it's just a very high quality record from again a band that you wouldn't think of putting out something that is this nice, and you know what I mean when I say that.
No, it's like you it's like going to the swap meet and then you find a really nice piece of china that was not only kept in a cabinet, but when it was transported, it was bubble wrapped and put in packing peanuts. So when you got there, it's like a $5 price tag, but you pull it out and you're like, holy crap, this thing is like brand new. It's got a sheen to it, there's a high quality to the production. The production is, the guitar tone in this album is ridiculous. Like it's absolutely absurd how good it is. The snare drum, I can't get over how much I love the snare drum. The more I'm doing these podcasts with you and these live streams where I'm listening to these albums that I've heard a bunch of times, or even for the first time, but I'm going in and listening to it from a different vantage point, and I'm not listening to it like, okay, do I want to sing along? Yeah, sure. But I want to pull apart my personal experience with the production, the vocals, the lyrics, the sound, the volume, the this, the that, How are the mids on this? Is there some weird white noise thing in the background that I don't like? Like, whatever. I'm listening to these records and I'm just getting a whole different experience out of it, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and Dwayne really can sing well.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's not like he's never been accused of not it, but when you think of U.S. Bounds, you think of a lot of the live footage of them, and it sounds very gruff. There's not a lot of those gruff vocals on this album. He sings it; it's in his voice, and his voice has a certain gravel to it. But
it's a nasally gravel, like higher, like middle to high pitched voice. But it's like, man, he sings better than. Look, the Sex Pistols music is great and it's timeless, but dude, if that's where this came from. Well, this vocal is better than those. Well, I said that messed up. He sings better than Johnny Rotten sang.
Yeah, and I think he sings very formally too. Like I think again he doesn't have the purest voice of all time, but like I think if you were bringing in someone to be like, hey, put in this vocal part, they would know how to competently sing. It would be done like that. At the same time, he does bring that sort of gravel and whiskey in his voice that kind of comes out there. There was a band you had shown me a couple weeks ago that kind of reminded me of this. I can't remember who. The one that has like that tattoo flash as their cover, like that Black Panther tattoo flash.
Generation Exit.
Maybe that's what it is.
That's who it is.
That's kind of
it's Chris. I know
has a vibe.
Yeah,
has a vibe kind of similar to this.
Yeah.
That same sort of.
Dude. Shout out to Chris Klink. That's my dog, bro. He's one of my favorite singers of all time.
Clean but ugly is kind of what we keep getting at, and it's which really kind of underscores a lot of what punk rock is, because punk rock is often this very simple music that's done kind of wild, these sort of contradictions, and Dwayne just did it really, really well.
I love his vocals. I love Chris Klink's vocals, man. That guy's got some of my favorite vocals I've ever heard in my life. It's crazy. I went and listened to a record of his from like 20 years ago the other day, right after I'd listened to some more modern stuff of his. And I didn't realize how much his voice has actually changed. It still sounds the same to me, but he's like, he's 20 years older, so it just sounds different. It's interesting. So before we move on, I don't think there's a whole lot more to talk about with the bombs, but I did want to talk about something just briefly. Okay. Let's see here. Oh man, you had mentioned that it was kind of a long record, and my first thought was like, oh, I didn't think it was that long. But the reason that I didn't think it was that long is because last night I told you I did a 3-hour and like 40-something minute stream. The reason the stream was so long is because it was a Patreon request album review stream. The album that they chose was Green Day, 21st Century Breakdown. I had never heard that album before. Yeah. Bro, what a chore to get through that record. So I know we've like talked about it just a little bit, but I guess now I kind of know why we haven't gone into detail. Dude, what is your opinion on that record?
So no, because
trash.
Because again, another band, Green Day, that I generally like their whole catalog. You know what I mean? Like even the stuff I don't love, I think like they generally have quality. That album though, like if you get the hits that were on the radio and stuff, it's got nice packaging to it. It seems like, okay, this is the lesser good American Idiot. Cool, whatever. No, it really is the lesser good American Idiot whenever you spit it though too, because like American Idiot, I know like you don't necessarily love the format of that record, and it is something that has to be done well, I think, to pull off. This is them kind of copying and pasting almost everything they did on American Idiot, with them also trying out new sounds on top of that, and it just does not work. It's just boring and long, and I can't follow the whole St. Jimmy thing on American Idiot was really easy to follow. I can't follow what the hell the storyline is on that thing. It's bloated. Like I don't understand how it's just because American Idiot was so big that there's like a whole generation of people that also bought that, and so that one's good too, and they haven't interrogated this.
So the guy that requested a shout out to Matt. He's a really cool dude, man. He's very nice. He supports the channel, not with just his time, but with his money. So I appreciate that. And I went through it, and that my biggest complaint was that it was just bloated is a great word, man. It was so incredibly long. Every song was 4 minutes or more. Everything just kept going and going. They had like 5 tracks that had the exact same structure. Slow, 45 to 60 second intro, and then this like big ballady like blow up, but they all sounded identical. Well, the sucky part is that the one that was good was the last one, and by the time I got to that song, I was so tired of hearing Green Day. Like it was wild, man. Like I'm not here to like bash on Green Day necessarily. I like the band quite a bit, and actually I really have grown to like Dookie more. I used to kind of not like that album. Last few months I've really liked it a lot. I like a lot of their catalog enough to own it, but and I like their album everybody hates too. So I mean I like the band, but this album was rough, dude. I went through and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 out of 19 songs that I like. Now, out of those 9, there's like 4 that I like enough to put on like maybe a mixtape or a playlist, right? But I mean that makes it a mid album because there's like you're not even hitting the 50% mark. So I go by mathematics, man. I refuse to like not. You have to, man. If I like 9 out of 19 songs, it's not getting anything but a 5 out of 10 for me. I will say that there was a couple of great songs on this album. But it sucks because those songs were great and they were just in the middle of a bunch of nothing, man. And you have like a 4-song little spot here with Peacemaker, Last of the American Girls, Murder City, and Viva La Gloria, Little Girl. Those are like pretty good tracks. Even the 2 like Static Age and Horseshoes and Hand Grenades are pretty good. But dude, you have to make it through like 40 minutes of music to even get to that. And so it's weird, man. But when you said that the Bombs album was long, I thought, that wasn't that long. It's because the night before I listened to this record that was so long, man. And what's your opinion on him saying the N-word in that song, Billy Joe?
What song does he do that in? I don't recall.
Oh man, it's towards the end of the record. I can't remember which song it is. It might be I don't know. Second half of the album, later in the album, it might be one of the last songs on there. I think it is one of the last songs on there. It might be 21. No, it's not 21 Guns. It might be American Eulogy. I can't remember, but he says it in there. He's quoting a police officer, but I feel like it's one of these things to where he did it to like because he could go, well, yeah, but I did it for this reason. I just think it's like a word you shouldn't just say in a song, regardless of the context.
Yeah, I mean, like. So I would generally just advise to just not go there.
Like do what you want, but like I was just like, wow, I don't know why you would do that. It just seems kind of like edgelordy, like because like the way he did it, I do think you should be like, dude, that word is not a word that you cannot say. It's a word that you cannot call people. All right, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there's examples of it being pretty powerful too, with like in the Dead Kennedys. It's in Holiday in Cambodia.
Right.
There's a line where it I think has the intent, and that's what it is. If it
and
has
that might
sort
have
of
been what he was aiming for, even
that intended effect, the intended effect of what it is. I just think too, like you just want to be careful of how that context is not applied to you.
Well, that's the thing is that as soon as you do that, everybody's taking it out of context. Nobody's gonna like go and read your lyrics and go, oh, but he was saying. You're gonna have to explain that forever. Now, I think that if you're gonna do that, it's also really cowardly to bury it at the very end of your record where you didn't even know he did it.
Yeah,
like that's wild, right? So if you're gonna do it, A, just do it. But B, I really advise against it. I was really surprised when somebody told me that he did that. I was like, he does what? And they were like, he says this word, and I was like, in my head, I was like, there ain't no way he said that. And then I'm like reading the lyrics with it, and I was just like, okay, yeah, he said it. Hard R. That's I'm pretty uncomfortable. That's weird. Like, dude.
Whenever you heard that, did you think there was like a rap verse in the middle of the song or something? Like,
bro, well, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, dude, I was like, maybe he's saying it like quoting a profound like verse from like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, where they said something where it was like very intentional with a, I don't know, where it had some kind of, but it was like a police officer calling. I thought it was kind of weird, man. Like, and I'm just saying, like, I would like for people that are listening to this that are, you know, absolutely going to comment and be like, you're retarded. He did it for this. Da 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 da. Cool. I'm just curious as to like what the deal. Like, I don't understand why he would make that choice. It's a really weird one. It feels like he didn't even really make the choice the right way. It's like, he went like with this like look what I can do thing, but then he didn't do it with any confidence, which makes me feel like it's super sketchy. Like I'm just like, dude.
Yeah, I know. Like there's like stuff that I'll read with my students at work and stuff, and like this sometimes when that word is loaded in there, I'll like for them to kind of hear it in the context. Sometimes I'm not gonna be the one reading it out. That's for sure,
dude.
But I'll like for them to hear to hear the power
TikTok, dude,
of it. But that's my thing. Yeah, I am not gonna get remixed on that.
I was gonna say some techno DJ's gonna get a hold of it. You're gonna end up on a song. You're gonna be like, oh my goodness, dude.
It's gonna be a punk rock YouTuber goes. Oh man, yeah.
But like, yeah, man. It was somebody compared it to when he dropped the F word, and I was like, bro, it's not the same, man. Like those words are just not the same. And then somebody else pointed out that like he says he's bisexual, so like he's got kind of a pass on the F word. And I was like, that's also pretty accurate, man. If you're part of the queer community, you can say that word and nobody will really look at you different. But if you're even light skinned, just ask Drake. Kendrick Lamar made a whole song about I don't like it when you say it. So I thought that was a pretty good tie-in. I came up with that off the top of my head. Let's go.
Wow.
But like seriously though. It was weird. But yeah, enough Green Day talk. I listened to that album for the first time yesterday, and I the production was phenomenal. Other than that, I wasn't very impressed.
It's a rock band that had a big hit and then tried to do it again.
Duplicate it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about another rock band that had a big hit. Weezer, bro.
Yeah.
The Blue Album, man. I want to start this off by saying one sentence, and then you take off with this.
Okay.
How absolutely nuts is it that this was their first record?
No, that's insane. Because you would assume this is the culmination of years and years and years of work and having been discovered and all of this stuff, because it is very much like a perfected alternative music when you're getting to it. Like this is the peak again. And as you said, they were always trying these things to replicate what they did here, including the albums after Colors and doing all this stuff. They had hits after this. They did that, but it's like, again, like Nevermind is Nirvana's second album. You know, when you think of the albums like that, where everyone knows every song, like, you know, there's usually some sort of buildup, and that's why I think Weezer is so inoffensive to people too, like even people like in our space as well, because they're just a band everyone heard on the radio. Like there's nothing more and nothing less to them, so we don't have to interrogate a lot of the bigger questions about their credibility and their roots and all that. They take a lot from a lot of.
They got a lot of crap for that, didn't they? For being like this band that like presented themselves as kind of an emo-ish indie type band, but they were just like outright on a major label immediately, and they had these smash hits. I think people thought they were industry plants, even is what I was hearing. I'm pretty confident I heard that more than once.
And that could be. And again, and even if that is the case, I think it kind of speaks to their weird spot in like our conscious as well, because when I think of 90s rock, it doesn't get any more cliche than these guys. And
the sweater song is exactly what I think of when I think of 90s rock.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking of I was going to come on here with all these takes about like its connection to like grunge and all of that. I'm like, whoa. This sounds nothing like any of that. This is all mid to late 90s. And then looking at this comes out in 1994, the same time all these other albums. And it's not just punk. It's just alternative, lowercase a alternative music is just huge in 1994. It's kind of amazing because, yeah, Nirvana does deserve a lot of credit for really helping open that door. That's why a lot of these guys did get a chance. But it's a completely different style of music in that first part of the decade. When we start getting to the mid part of the decade, it's just a little bit different. Now, obviously, it's inspired by, and the door is open, like especially like the bass sounds on this album. I think you could hear a lot of that Nirvana styling in there. But it's correct. It's really its own thing, and I think a lot of this '90s rock, it is that it borrows a lot of. It feels like every 20 years or so, we start going back and getting, like in the 70s, those bands took from the 50s, and then in the 90s, these guys took from the 70s and the 50s.
Right, I agree with that. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, and it just makes sense generationally of like what's in and what you would have heard. So you have all this that really an album like this that fits in it fits in pretty smoothly, like next to Dookie on a radio playlist. Also fits in
Very
well
much.
with like Oasis and all that other stuff. It doesn't really conflict
Yes.
with any of that. I think I got into this album probably in the late '90s. I always talk about like those early bad influences I had that got me into like Sublime and The Offspring and that kind of stuff. Like
Right.
those guys also, I remember that one dude had a Weezer album and he would just play it over and over again. It was that sort of oeuvre, and I think that is I never really thought of them in as what you're saying, but I could even see like the Nirvana hardcore crowd or that like grunge hardcore crowd even not liking them because they're not like an activist band. They don't have any of
Well,
those trimmings of any of those kind of things.
one of the reasons why I think a Nirvana fan may dislike Weezer, and I'm not saying that this is, all of or even a portion of them, just, any individual, is that I wrote down on the song No One Else that it is heavily inspired by Nirvana. But it's like if Nirvana was not only inspired by the Pixies, but also 50s rock and roll. There's like a little 50s pop flair in that song, but it also sounds like a Nirvana song.
Yeah,
It's
well,
weird, man. It's so
and
strange.
Kurt was very inspired by the Pixies. In fact, like the Teen Spirit
Yes.
riff is a copy of a Pixies song. But you said the '50s thing. I think that's the key because I have written in my notes. It's kind of like a lot of this is very Beach Boys. Like
Oh, yeah.
there's a ton of like Beach Boys stuff that's just infused in this, almost like an alternative Beach Boy. Like I think a couple weeks ago I might have said that like Pearl Jam was like classic rock on '90s. Well, this is like Beach Boys kind of on the '90s.
Well, that's why they fit so well in this channel. It's because they're very punk rock adjacent because they have a lot of stuff in common with Ramones core bands without being one.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, they do, and I think again they to the extent that you could sort of see a connection to punk. It's like the indie branch that the Ramones sort of broke off of, and again we talked about last week with all the bands that came later, like the Hives and the Vines and all that.
Yep.
There's you look at what Weezer was. Weezer was kind of a proto version of a lot of those bands, but they're more. They have other trimmings, these more alternative trimmings, and there's a lot of like. If you listen to these songs, they were produced by Rick Ocasek. So Rick Ocasek of the Cars, who produced a lot of alternative.
Cars.
Yeah, and he yeah, no, I always think of what is like kind of generic '80s pop. Like I always reference like the Cars, and I don't mean that as an insult to them. It means like that's like when you think of like anyone similar to an album like this. Anyone that kind of grew up in the late '90s that ever like listened to alternative or rock probably knows a few Weezer songs. Like it's just kind of part of what you would do. The same way in the '80s, if you listen to pop music, you would have known like the Cars. They're kind of in that sort of thing. And so Rick Ocasek really like producing a lot of punk and alternative. He actually produced a Bad Religion album.
No kidding.
In the mid '90s, and you see a lot of. I wouldn't say there's like doesn't sound like an 80s album, but there's a lot of keyboard in there. There's a lot of guitar parts where whenever there's a lot of the sonic like clattering, that kind of grunge kind of thing, the guitar is usually doing something kind of like pretty or melodic along with it. And where I think it really borrows from that Beach Boys stuff is not every song seems like it's completely like linear. And so there's songs where it's like the instruments kind of feel like they're going in somewhat disparate directions. It's not the way like a punk album is sort of going for this forward sort of thudding train. Everything's on the same track. I feel like this stuff is a little bit looser than what we would take out of a punk album. It does feel like it doesn't need to be talked about on a punk rock channel because especially if you talk about the rise of punk in the mid '90s and all that stuff that it's birthed, like this sort of gets clustered in with there. Not that anyone ever thought of this as punk, but if this music could be popular and on the radio, so could The Offspring, so could Green Day. Well, it's like a proof of concept and a further proving of where music really headed in that decade.
I 100% agree. And every punk rocker that I knew that listened to like, let's say every on the iceberg, everybody above the water and maybe treading water they all had Weezer album because they all had Sublime, they all had No Doubt, and because the '90s the '90s are a decade that will never be repeated because every single genre also had stuff in common with every single genre. It was weird. Like
yes,
that's what when people say alternative, that's what they mean. They mean the '90s.
Mm-hmm. Well,
like
that's what I was saying.
Weezer could be alternative, Rancid could be alternative, The Offspring, but so could Nirvana. Honestly, so could Guns N' Roses almost. Like, there's just so much music that falls under the umbrella of alternative rock.
It really is. Like I never know when I fill something out, like what kind of music you listen to, and I see alternative on there. I usually, if I see alternative and I see rock, I usually assume alternative is what I would check, even though like I don't consider myself
Well,
a
yeah,
fan.
those are the options. I'm going with alternative.
Alternative is where like punk would be housed, and that kind of stuff with it. I think really it does speak to the power also of rock radio when we're saying that, is because that's when you think of like there was alternative rock stations that sort of differentiated themselves from the stuff that might have played more of the Guns and Roses and stuff like that.
That's true.
And so you have this stuff that at least in the 90s had like a hip sheen to it, that it would be played from there, and stuff like Weezer would also go on mainstream pop and all of that, so it would branch out from there.
Right.
And I think that's when you think again 1994, like 1994 is also the year that like new metal starts. It's also the
Ugh.
year that Pantera puts out Vulgar, it's the Blue Album, whatever that
Far Beyond Driven.
Far Beyond Driven. So it's the second ever metal album to go number one. Rock music is just huge. It's funny that rock in the 90s is when the whole rock is dead thing really got started, but rock music's actually huge in the 90s. It's not until the next decade that it really starts burning off and dying out. Rock explodes in the 90s.
Man, you remember that band Presidents of the United States of America? Like
Yeah.
that band could only exist in a world where Weezer exists, bro.
Well, and it's funny because like these genres in the 90s didn't like nowadays you have this thing where you make like new music out of like, oh, we're gonna combine this and we're gonna combine this. They like weren't smart enough yet to do it in the 90s. So the 90s is just like we're gonna have this and this and this, and we're just gonna it was more of a salad. It wasn't a soup yet of all this
Right. They're
stuff.
like, I'm just gonna make music. If it sounds cool, I'm gonna put it out.
Like that's why like the Beastie Boys and Sepultura and Weezer and all of that can kind of all again they're all coexisting on the same alternative rock station, just going
It's
from
so
one
weird.
to the other. It's also could never exist like that again, because all of that stuff nowadays would just all find its own specific audience. You know what I mean? And all these guys would just
Yes.
be on this forum or this social media and this doing that. Again, like you said, everyone kind of had the Sublime and the Weezer because that's just what because everybody had that, everyone had been familiar with it. It was so everywhere. They always talk about the end of the monoculture, but it was true. Like everyone knew. Like I don't know anyone who doesn't know the Sweater Song who like has any consciousness from that time period.
Well, I mean, back then, this was the stuff that showed people that you were into music. Like, if you were into music back in the 90s, that you're the one that had the Weezer records, the Sublime records, the Nirvana, the Pixies, all that stuff. You had that kind of stuff. And then if you were like really into music, that stuff was the shit you left at your friend's house because you didn't really care about it anymore because you were, maybe a rung lower on the ladder or whatever, however you want to word it, but you were just a little deeper into the music scene. But like, this is how you can tell somebody who's actually seriously into music, is they owned Weezer, and maybe they also owned Pinkerton when it came out or something. Like I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It was like a sign of the fact that you're a music person. I don't know anybody that wasn't into music that had Weezer, because their songs are weird, man.
Yeah. It's like the minimum requirement almost of being into the music in that.
That's okay. That's a better way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think again back then now you could just not know about something and follow stuff on its own. Back then you kind of just had to have a general literacy of everything. And I think Weezer really chased this album for a long time. It wasn't until I think it was 2001 with that Green album where they really had like another album they could really pull hits off of and tour off of like really successfully. And it was the Last Time Census album. So it took them like another 7 or 8 years to really get back going. And since then, they've actually been, like a fairly consistent band, but also has kind of attained legend status in the process. If you look at them now, though, they do tend to tour with bands closer to that punk side of thing. Like they're always touring with like Green Day, or they're touring with a lot of these bands that are a lot closer to punk rock, because I think history has largely remembered them as a band that like every time I Google like pop punk bands and pop punk hits, their songs come up, and that doesn't feel right to me because nobody at the time thought of them like that. You know what I mean?
Well, because they're not a pop punk band. It's like, shit, dude. Finn McKenty just did another video where he talked about the pop punk iceberg, and literally 95% of the bands he talked about weren't even pop punk, dude. So like, when what I would consider normal people, the the normal world talks about music, they don't even know what they're talking about. So yeah, they always lump it in with punk stuff. And while I don't mind it because I like the band, it's also annoying because it's not punk rock music. But they did do that Hella Mega tour recently. Who was that with?
That was with Green Day, Fall
Yeah.
Out Boy, the Interrupters opened. Yeah.
What a crazy tour that was.
That was for if you liked anything in the '90s, they were just giving you.
Man, yeah, that was a lineup, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I do think their appropriateness there. It misses the mark. It's like something that an algorithm would pull up of like, okay, I guess this is what it is. But it's like no. It's just like if you listen to a lot of later pop punk and a lot of emo specifically, it just sounds a lot like this. Like this, it's more like influential, I think, in the stuff we listen to probably than it actually belongs in it.
They're influenced by timeless music, so they're gonna put out timeless music. They have so much like doo-wop. I don't know what else to call it, man. Like this '50s soul doo-wop music in their stuff. It's all over this record, man, and it's not a bad thing. It's
I think it's like the song "In the Garage." Like that just sounds like something. I just think of like old men with like feathery hair, like coming over that on an acoustic guitar, in the garage. You know what I mean? And it's exactly what you said. It's like that sort of '50s, almost like music. And I know they did that in the video. Like it's old music that could be on the Ed Sullivan Show. Like it all looks like that. Every one of these songs has that feel to it, but at the same time, it sounds amazing. This mix is really, really good that you got for this. Like particularly like the low end is really, really strong on this. And I think whenever you have a well-made record, sometimes the genre isn't as important because it sounds really like it's just you appreciate it as sound. And I don't think we necessarily think of this album as like this sonic landmark or anything like this. But go back and just listen to it from a production standpoint. It sounds
right. Oh, it does sound very nice.
It sounds amazing. And I want to say it like it always has. Cause I did listen. Spotify's got the 2024 some kind of remaster of it. But I've had this album on CD for years, and it's one of those albums that you don't got to turn it that loud because it sounds good. Obviously it's clean. They're a clean sounding band, so that would
lots of. Actually, continue your thought. I have a.
No, but I was gonna say, but at the same time too, there's a way that this could have been produced to sound like it was like Train or something. You know what I mean? Like you could. These songs could have gone in the wrong direction. I think under the wrong hands. I think they did a good job of crafting them. So they're just alternative and ironic enough to really appeal to the guy that was going to Woodstock '94 and buying the Green Day album would also like this. I think they have enough of that nihilistic narcissism in it. It's more. If I want to put an analogy to punk, it's more like if the Descendants or Milo would have been transported to like the '90s and had like a little bit of a prettier band. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like nerd rock put out there, but it's also not like super introverted like Radiohead or that kind of stuff. That's like a little too hard to really grasp. It's very accessible.
I was gonna say it was the first incel band. Yeah. Like the bunch of dudes that just kind of stayed like they were smart. They have a song about Dungeons and Dragons, man. Like you that's incel shit, which is fine.
Yeah, nerd culture wasn't like as big of a thing in the.
Oh, it wasn't a thing back
nerds
in the 90s,
were still nerds in the
Yes, in the '90s, you were still a dork if you were a dork, and it's come around now to where you can be, kind of cool and popular if you're a nerd, and I like that. I think it's awesome, but
this band was a patron saint for all those guys that are like running the world now. They were all this band was.
I mean, was seriously. And they all looked like the original emo guys, dude. They had like the weird button downs and they had slacks, not jeans. They were the guys that wore like the low top Converse instead of the high tops.
Yeah, my cousin who was really into him. He wasn't like a punk rocker, but he was more like a hippie. And I like Weezer was like the perfect of like the stuff like what was happening. Weezer really appealed to him. And now I look at it. Okay, it's like they got kind of almost like those Beatles kind of haircuts that they have.
Very much, shaggy hair. They were,
which would again translate later to like I think of like especially that kind of mall emo kind of stuff. Think of like the Taking Back Sunday and that kind of stuff. That sounds very, very similar to like this. You could see that exactly. And then we talked about Jawbreaker a couple of weeks ago, and I was like. I think maybe we talked about like Dear You maybe not doing well. If Jawbreaker would have this is like what the label probably thought they were signing when they signed Jawbreaker, that they were going to get this, and they ended up getting that. This is probably what they were like they were saying for Dear You, how they wanted them to put out something a little lighter or with a little more space in it. I could see what they were thinking of was probably this. This is probably what that lane they wanted them to hit.
So the like on that topic, the influence from like the 50s stuff that they like a lot is that's where they get that, though. It's not like they did that to sell out or anything. That's just the influences for this music that they like to play. It is a little shinier and a little cleaner. It does have a little less fuzz. It's a little less lo-fi, a little more, I don't know what to call it, digital, like not digital, but like clean. It's cleaner. So very, very well produced. Like you said, there wasn't a lot of noise in the album. If there was a silent part, it was silent. Like it wasn't. There wasn't any like going on. It was like it was quiet. And on that topic, one thing that I thought about that I was like, man, I have got to bring this up. The songs are so simple. Like they're just simple songs. Bro, do you know how stressed out I'd have been trying to record a song like that? It's so simple. There it leaves absolutely no room for you to go in there and just drop the ball. Like you don't get to mess that up. You go imagine doing the vocals over one of these songs. Oh my goodness, dude. There's no gain. There's no there's very little like crunch in the guitar. It's mostly clean guitar, or like maybe not clean work, but you know what I'm saying. No, it's very
you're without a net. Yeah,
yeah.
So because no, the guitar. I know what you mean when you said the guitar was clean. You're not referring to a clean tone guitar. You're
correct.
referring to like a cleanly produced.
Right.
Like it's very distinct. Like if I had a better ear for music, I could probably tell you all the chords that they were playing on that, because there's a lot of clarity to it, more so than it being clear.
Yes, clarity is exactly the word I'm looking for here.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that's what sort of separates it from what would be like a dingier kind of record that could be applied to maybe some of these songs. They would sound maybe even more complex if they had that sort of thing. But as you're saying,
they weren't meant to sound complex, even though some of them are. Like playing them isn't necessarily easy, but they're simple songs. So instead of it having like 4 guitars layered over this with an extra drum machine and a keyboard in the background going no, it's like drums, bass, guitar, well written, simple, catchy songs. The 1950s, dude. That's what that is. That's the 1950s.
Yeah, and you had to be good at what you have to be good at what you do with the songwriting part of it, because they're like there are no bangers on this album. You know what I mean? By definition,
it's all about melody. It's about melody and hooks.
Yeah, and you got to be able to make people, but you still got to be able to make people feel something. You got to evoke emotion. And I think Weezer does a really good job of contrasting kind of serious stuff, but it never sounds drony or like we're here. Like sometimes when you listen to some of that emo music, it's like we got to go to church now to listen to these songs. You know what I mean? This never has that. Even though like Say It Ain't So, it's a slower song. Only in Dreams, more of like a dreary kind of almost shoegazy type songs, but it never really strays that far from that pop formula. Never that far from that sort of Beach Boys inspired stuff that it was clearly leaning into, like you were saying.
There's a couple of points in this record that really get you going, though. The Sweater Song, Say It Ain't So, and My Name Is Jonas are all songs that I forgot how good they were. And man, they're just, pop is the right word. They're so catchy, man. Like, there's no way this album could have come out and not been successful. Like, I think you could drop this album today and it would be successful.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot, because like I get annoyed with a lot of music that sounds like this. Like this, well, and I do. Like I always think like, oh, you're just trying to do like this very kind of generic poppy kind of stuff. And I guess there's nothing actually wrong with that, because Weezer did very generic poppy stuff and it was really, really good. But they have a lot of personality though too, in the way that's
what I was going to say. A lot of it is the people are just stale. They're boring.
Yeah, like Rivers Cuomo, he's another guy. He's on that list of these kind of cult of personality guys. He's kind of a weird dude himself,
yes.
But he very much affects something that like he's very distinctive, not just in his appearance, but the way those songs are sang. If he wanted to portray sort of this sort of nerd rocker with this little sort of he's really smart, but really sort of like kind of vengeful and spiteful and all those things that you putting out there, and a little bit of sensitivity and all that. He really embodied all of those. And, you know, his voice is a big part of, it's a big instrument, as you were saying, because it's got to be clean, but it still has to have, an affect to it. It's just really well done.
Well, sorry.
No, I was putting the period on my sentence there.
When he was doing melodies with his vocals, it was incredibly easy to hear because the songs don't have just layers and layers and layers on them. I revert back to my point about them being simple. It's like, man, you can hear this dude singing and you're like, oh, you either like it or you don't, but it's objectively well done. Like he is a very good singer for that kind of music. And I don't know, I just kept thinking about it, man. I like for real. There's probably a dozen points in this record where I just stopped and was like, doggone, man, this is such a simple, there's nothing in this song. It's just a simple track. I don't know if I could have done this. I just don't know that I'm good enough. I'm too flawed. It's like a metronome for a song, dude. There's like just click, 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 click. Just there's no, I don't know, man. I was really impressed by the amount of effortlessness. I don't know if I said that right. The lack of effort that was the way it felt. Mm-hmm. It felt like there was no effort put into it, but very clearly there was work put in this record.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, and I think, and I didn't do a ton of research on this one, like as we normally do, but they felt a lot of pressure, again, working with Rick Ocasek and that kind of thing. So it was something that I think that the recording on this was fairly difficult. Like, it was pretty tedious, and it was one of those things that they really teased out. When it was the final product, it kind of sounds like that, you know, those albums that come out like that. We've talked about Dookie before, how they said like Dookie was kind of, they started off as a messy record, this chaotic record, and the joy of getting that album together was refining it into what it became. And that, I don't know necessarily if that was the case here, but you could tell because everything they do, it has so much purpose. You wonder like what the bigger ideas were with some of these songs. So there's some stuff that kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, there's sometimes when like the guitar just sort of comes in and does its own thing for like a second, and then you get back to me. Or you have songs like Surf Wax America and The World Has Turned that have one thing and they're building and building and building. So as you say, it's like that simple thing, and the layers are coming on, and the guitar part keeps getting a little bit heavier. But that is where they build their sort of big sing along chanty kind of stuff, where you're sort of getting into the song, but you're not getting in from the beginning. You're not starting out like, you know, it's and you've already hummed it 3 times, so you already have like a literacy with it when you're listening to it, and then it hits the big crescendo. It's one of those things that it's not an insult. It's like, man, if you wanted to put in an algorithm like how to make a great rock record, this might be, you know, one template you could follow right here.
Well, the songs that they just creep up on you, and then all of a sudden they're these big songs, are often the best, man. I will say that there's a couple of times in this album where it goes from being, it's like a song. There's a few songs that you can't not pay attention to them, because they all of a sudden they go from being really quiet to being like really, really loud, and then back to being really quiet, specifically on a song like Say It Ain't So. And it's like, man, if you're not paying attention to this, you're not going to have any idea what's going on in this song. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but I find it pretty interesting. It's the kind of record, honestly, it's the kind of record that I wouldn't want to listen to in the car. Okay, maybe not all of it, but like some of it would be okay in the car. But like as a whole record, this would be hard to listen to in the car for me.
I know I definitely always had this one at the house when I was a kid. Never made it to the car, but that might have been a little bit of self-consciousness by me by having something that wasn't so punk in the car, though, too. You know,
I just feel like this one is one. It takes a little bit of concentration for me to like to enjoy it and to, you know,
I listened to it at Walmart today. It was a pretty good listen out of Walmart, but that was more of headphones on, immersive as I'm getting my stuff, and I was thinking of these kind of things. And it's funny, like a Sweater Song, I think of my buddy's band used to cover that, and everybody would be doing that thing, you know, during the and then it, you know, burst out into that. So what was the hip hop song that it was sampled on, like 2009?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, there was some. It was like a huge, like some party anthem, and
Really?
it was sampled upon there.
Hold
Uh,
on. I'm gonna
was
look
it?
that up while you're
It was
talking.
yeah. Come on, I think it was like a white rapper. It should be right up your alley. Who the heck
Of
was it?
course.
It was like 2009, 2010. Right when they were getting their big revival with the Beverly Hills song, that was so big
Let's see.
in that time period.
Oh my goodness, there's so many songs to sample Weezer. I'm not gonna go through all this. Wow. There
Was
are
it
literal tons of songs that sample Weezer. I did not know that.
called I Love College? I think that's what it was called.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Y-
That
y-
song is pretty good actually.
Yeah, and doesn't that isn't that basically say it ain't so is how
Oh,
is
kind of is.
yeah, I think
Okay.
it samples that through there. Yeah.
Oh, what's that guy's name? He had the
Asher Roth,
Asher
yeah.
Roth. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that guy had a good album, but he fell off hard after that.
Oh yeah.
Oh
He had
man.
Weezer, that's what he had. What's you don't
Right.
gotta flow Weezer in every song.
You know what I thought was cool is one of the things that I like about an album like this is that since it is adjacent to punk rock, the Weezer Blue Album could easily be a gateway drug.
Mm.
I was in the car. I said I didn't want to listen to this in the car, and then I just realized that I was in the car listening to it a little bit with my kids earlier, and I was getting another listen in, and we were driving up to the grocery store. I forgot that I even did that, but my daughter was like really interested in this album. Like she was very into every song she heard, which wasn't a ton. We were only in the car for 15 minutes, but she really liked it. She was like drumming on her legs a lot, trying to keep rhythm. And I think that a more complex, faster, more abrasive punk song, she might like the song, but she was invested in this one, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too. It's not that hard to say. Okay, you like all of this stuff. You like the songs and everything. The drums go like this and all this stuff. Pretty much everything they do here. There's a lot of that in punk, just sort of in a different
Right.
presentation. So it is one that I think would be easy to sort of help people connect the dots. Which I think I think it did. I think the people who liked alternative music had a proclivity to like punk, even if that's not necessarily what they thought they like. And Weezer was at the top of all of that stuff that they loved.
Well, that goes back to the 90s being just a giant melting pot because everybody that liked Marilyn Manson also liked Green Day
Mm-hmm.
and Offspring. And everybody that liked Green Day and Offspring also listened to Slipknot and Pantera and Korn.
Mm-hmm.
And they liked the Deftones and liked Sublime. And they liked, that's when rap wasn't quite what it is today. Rap started coming around. You had stuff like Bone Thugs, Lil Wayne. Man, Lil Wayne's been around a long time. Bone Thugs and Harmony, Lil Wayne, stuff like that. Juvenile. So you had like the New Orleans hip hop, and then you had like East Coast and West Coast. You didn't have like Atlanta wasn't a thing yet. You didn't have, it just wasn't. Music was still very guitar centric.
Yeah, hip hop wasn't. It's hard for people to understand. Hip hop wasn't pop music yet. So there would be.
That's right. That's the way to put it.
Yeah, if
hip
there
hop
was,
wasn't pop music yet.
if there were big hip hop artists, they were just big hip hop artists. Now, even to the extent that people would be crossover, it was more filtered through like other stuff because like maybe like some of the mainstream music that like the boy and the girl groups were doing had a very hip hop base to it, so kind of borrowed a lot from hip hop.
Well, you had stuff like Beck and Beastie Boys and Gorillaz that were all kind of like in that world.
Yeah, they really did, and even and then eventually like what we spit out was like new metal was like our response of how we're gonna sew these things together. But
white people, man,
yeah. And then you have to take into account that there's a whole other force in the 1990s, this thing called our television, and now MTV is just so prevalent, and MTV brings in alternative music. That's the thing. MTV is actually probably huger for music in the 80s. That's when video is killing the radio star, but alternative music isn't. They go through their phases where they have alternative, but it's pretty much just an extension of pop radio. Whereas I think when you get to the 90s, when it becomes this uber visual medium, and there's just more space for this stuff, and the crowd, the audience did change. Like the people that might have been 12 when Nirvana Nevermind came out, now they were 16 and 17 and still needed their kind of fix.
Right. And then when you're mixing in stuff like Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys, and then all of a sudden you see Sum 41 and Blink-182 on the same show. It's weird, man. Like, I can understand why a punk audience would have been pissed off about that. Like, I never really thought about it, like from that perspective until just now. Like, I can kind of understand why people that were super into punk in the 90s that were older, like people that are 10, 12 years older than us, were like, dude, this is garbage, because, different strokes for different folks is one thing, but to them, it was just another pop song. It was one of our gateway bands, but to them, it was just more pop music that they didn't want to be a part of, more commercial
another
stuff
commodity that
on
was,
MTV, a channel that they probably hated. I know I'd never liked MTV. I never watched it. I was never a fan. I didn't like it when the bands were on there. I didn't like it when Rancid was on MTV. I didn't like it. I hated MTV because when I was younger, that was the people that liked the stuff I didn't like. The MTV was the normie people. But in the 90s, late 90s specifically, like 94, 90, let's say 95 and on, so the second half of the 90s, very, very much you got skate culture in the MTV, you got punk on MTV, you got metal stuff coming in with the new metal bands, and all these subcultures and subgenres of music that we all love were like getting infiltrated and overrun by these giant labels and executives, and it was like simultaneously the worst thing ever and also one of the coolest things to happen to underground music.
But I'm like that like it doesn't. It's more romanticized, I think, now than what it actually was. Even like MTV, like when they say like how much did they really grow like alternative music? Well, they kind of had to be like kind of forced into it. Like alternative music had to get big, and then they kind of went to it. But I'm so glad that all of that happened, though. Like in retrospect,
well, that's kind of what I was. That's kind of what
it's
I
so
meant,
awesome now that like there's the and MTV stuff hard to find archives, but all of that stuff, the fact that it existed made it so permanent, though, and made it so now that if you don't care about that freaking context 30 years later or whatever, that we have so much from that time period is so documented. And I think that's a lot of why a lot of parts of 90s culture, not just in music, don't ever really die and never really. That's like the last time. That's like when we started recording history. It feels like for a lot of this stuff is right around that time period. So we still have the same icons, the same artists in a lot of ways. The music are still kind of on top. We haven't really gotten over the 90s like as a culture.
No, it's 90s have actually come back all of a sudden. So I mean, it's weird because the 90s is a decade where you could have bands like Green Day literally on the same bill as that what's that Butterfly song? Come my lady.
Crazy Town.
Oh my goodness. The fact that somebody could put that band in the same sentence as a band that came from Gilman Street is just, it's nauseating to me. Like I
gotta tell you. I
went like that band?
It's all right song. I heard it on Saturday because I went to something called a new metal night on Saturday night.
This past weekend?
Yeah. It was awesome. So I was worried we were gonna be like the oldest people in there. Which if they would have done a scale, but like it was a all ages show, so they had they had like the non-drinking part segregated. So all those old people were back in the drinking, just banging our heads to all these hits of the late, and everyone went crazy because like they played like a Slipknot song, and then they played a Soulfly song, and then they were doing all this stuff, and then they busted out Crazy Town, and everyone was really excited singing that song, but like one of those things was not like the other. And how did that ever get considered new metal is beyond me, even by the standards of new metal. Is insane.
People were lumping it in with punk stuff because you had bands like Sublime and 311 that had this like hip hop, like I don't know, like just a little sprinkle of hip hop influence in their music, and so naturally you'd have Crazy Town got lumped in with that, but it also got lumped in with Limp Bizkit and stuff. So this is how you had bands like the Deftones end up on the Warped Tour, because to a certain degree they're all kind of the same thing. They're all skate culture. Like, man, the 90s were weird, bro. They were so weird.
That is where the unsort of spoken influence of hardcore really manifests itself too. I think I think hardcore is a lot of the link that we don't always talk about. That links like a lot of those new metal bands. To the extent that they liked anything with punk, obviously they loved Hatebreed, but they also loved like Minor Threat. They loved like hardcore as a concept. And I think hardcore, I think it sort of gets its moment in the sun in the 2000s when the mainstream bands started sounding more like hardcore. But it was really, I think, a big part of spreading a lot of this music, even tangentially throughout the late 90s.
hardcore got really big when Hatebreed got big, and then Ozfest became a thing, and Hatebreed was like headlining Ozfest, and then Jamie Josta got to be the guy for Headbangers Ball, and you're like, this isn't even a metal guy; it's a hardcore band. But I mean, whatever. They have a lot of metal influence in their later stuff, but their first couple of albums were straight up hardcore records. Yeah, man, I actually really like Hatebreed quite a bit. That dude's vocals are awesome.
Yeah, I like more them than I think I like their music. Like I just like there's
nothing wrong with that. They're awesome dudes, man. They're cool guys too. I've met them a bunch of times. I say a bunch, like a handful.
Infrastructure of a lot of stuff. We talk about that a lot in the 90s, like to the extent that any of this exists. We talked about it in the Offspring. The 90s built a lot of like the template for what everything else was, because it was never going to be as profitable necessarily as it was. Because even in the 2000s, when there's some artists that are really big, the record labels are still freaking out in the 2000s because the sales are starting to dip and they don't know what direction they're going to go. The 90s, they're just backing up the money. They're just opening the bank accounts and letting these guys go hog wild. And we got a lot of really good art, I think, as a result of it, because there was a lot of stuff that labels could kind of take chances on to see where it would go.
As an example, I brought up Presidents of the United States of America earlier. That is a very weird band, but they got a couple of really great songs. And we would have never heard those songs without the 90s being what the 90s were. Look at a band like White Zombie, bro. That band would have never existed if it wasn't for the 90s being just a weird, eclectic decade. Because that music, while we think of it as metal, go listen to a White Zombie record, bro. That stuff is weird, man. They got a couple of like super catchy metal tracks. Everything else on it is really strange. And whatever, I don't care. I don't listen to that band very often, but I mean, you had stuff like Lords of Acid. Oh my goodness, bro, that 90s were so ridiculous.
Remember the
all the way down to Fatboy Slim and Chemical Brothers, bro. I shouldn't even know these bands, dude.
I was listening to the Bloodhound Gang the other day. Speaking of the 90s, that came on the.
I would never listen to that, dude. Like, you just simply couldn't get me to listen. Although I will unironically listen to ICP. So whatever.
See, that is my red line. That is my one. Like I respect them because I think a lot of those guys basically have all the same sort of, like, they're wired in a very similar way than the punk rockers are. They just they just have really crappy taste in music.
I like ICP's music. Like, it's terrible to a certain degree, but like I like it because I like the idea of what they do. They've got punk rock basically, but with clown makeup on and rap music.
That's why I like, from a cultural perspective, I think it's like cool, and like the communities that they build out of it has a lot of those punk ethos, I think, embedded in it. I just,
like, for years I said whoop whoop unironically.
I feel like if I ever like am in charge of hiring people for a job, I'm gonna go through your past, and if I find out you were like an ICP fan, like, I'm not hiring you. Like that shows
you have a Juggalo tattue, you got a Hatchet Man tattoo.
It shows a lack of character. Judgment.
Wait, you got one on your neck? Okay, you're hired. Never mind. You're dude. I mean, they Fago. I mean, like, come on, bro.
That's a whole, and there's a whole empire, and then the copycat bands off of that. I mean, that's a whole thing. Man, they come to town and they need like security downtown and like for crowd. Yeah, they are a band that just, man, they really bring out the emotions in people. Again, only in the 90s. Only the 90s could have produced something like that. Something like that today would just be a novelty.
Dude, in the 90s, you literally would have shows, like big fests, that had fucking ICP, Bloodhound Gang, Soundgarden, and The Offspring, like, all in the same stage. Like, what are we talking about? I remember seeing Eminem at Warped Tour, though, like way back, maybe 99, 2000,
yeah,
something like
I think
that.
98. Yeah, it's one of those late 90s ones.
Man, 90s were fun, man. I had a lot of fun, but I'm glad I stuck with punk, but the 90s were fun.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I do think, though, having that punk background really helps you understand a lot of that, because punk itself, like, it was not always prevalent. Like, again, I don't think at the time a lot of people were thinking, of like that great punk band Weezer, or thinking about the connection of punk to Weezer. But now we've had a little bit of time to sit on it. We really just see the influence of punk rock on that 90s stuff, because I said, whether it's hardcore, a lot of that 90s stuff branched off of different slices of punk that it came out of the 80s when it's sort of embryonic, and a lot of that stuff, whether it's the grunge, whether it's the post grunge, whether it's the third wave ska, whether it's the alternative, whether it's the pop punk, it all kind of comes off of different variations of what punk rock, what the Ramones and the Pistols brought in the late '70s, and then it took about 10 years for it to sort of percolate back to the top.
I oftentimes would think, and even often I would say, when I think the 90s, I think the Warped Tour, but I think I'm going to change that officially to the Warped Tour feels more like a 2000s thing, because the 90s was like 98, 99, but that's still the end of the decade. Lollapalooza was a 90s
feels very
thing.
90s. It feels like these, but yeah, like I don't even know if Weezer was ever on it, but Lollapalooza to me, I think of alternative rock. I think of the old,
Yeah.
everyone but
Jane's
96.
Addiction, Perry
yeah,
Farrell.
Yeah, he founded the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think of these bands again. I think of Sonic Youth being kind of connected to them. I think of that sort of.
I hate all that music, bro, so much. There's a lot of 90s stuff that I really hate. Like, I don't like a lot of 80s music either, though. Like,
yeah,
all the mainstream stuff I'm just not a fan of.
Yeah, you do have a funny thing because you like really old music, but it's like it's right there. It's like from like 75 to like 92. You check out and like
I have the worst music taste, bro. I'm okay with it. I don't care.
You don't have the worst music taste. You have the most incoherent music taste. That's the difference.
You're not wrong, sir. I don't know what's up with my musical tastes. I refuse to accept responsibility for it.
Well, like I don't think people would necessarily judge you as a huge Blue Album guy, right? Of what we're talking about here, but if you talk,
I don't.
You're clearly into a lot of this style of music.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't know if I own it, but I don't hate it. I like the stuff that influenced them. You know what I'm saying? I like a lot of old 50s music. I think it's beautiful. And
it's a big part of why you like punk, right? It's like
yes,
it has a lot of that. I mean, punk always had that.
Well, that's why
Ramones
core is so important to me, because now I don't have all the knowledge on those bands, but I like what I hear. Every time I hear something that I've never heard before, I'm like, oh yeah, I like this. Like I'm about to do a Ramones core video, and I'm terrified, to be honest with you, man, because that fandom is brutal, and I just don't have the knowledge that they might want me to have. But like, how else am I going to get it? By doing the video, man, doing the research, asking you guys for your help. Like, chill, man. Why don't you be an asset, not an ass? Like, what are we doing? I'm making another shirt for the channel, bro, and it just says, I don't need no. What was it? I think it was very simple. I wanted to say, don't tell me what bands to like. I think that's, or I don't need you to tell me what bands to like, or something like that. But it was going to be basically like I like what I like, man. Like, people need to just be left the fuck alone if they like what they like. I just have never understood having to tell people what to listen to and enjoy, or what to eat and enjoy, or what to watch on the TV. Like, let people like what they like. If I don't like it and we're talking about it and you ask me how I feel about it, I'll tell you I don't care for it. But to tell you that you shouldn't listen to it is crazy. Like, that's so weird to me. Oh man.
Yeah,
like,
I get
the
excited.
Bloodhound Gang is awful, but I don't give a shit if you go listen to it. I don't care.
People going through, like, people loving music too. Like I enjoy, like, even if, like, again, I was at that new metal night, and there was people that were decked out in all their new metal patches. Like, I'd never seen this before. They had like new metal battle vests, and I was thinking, like, wow, that's cool though. Like, that is cool that they go.
No, it's not. Oh,
okay, so that's the exception. That's the exception.
No, I'm just a Scrooge, bro. I just no, man, no. You can do it, but I'm gonna talk about it. Like, that's the way I feel.
for sure.
Yeah, you can do it. You want to put patches on that, and you want to have a corn back patch, go for it. But I'm gonna tell you it's lame. Yeah, but go for it.
It was literally a corn. The corn was the centerpiece of this. I'm not even kidding about this. I had just never seen like new metal costumes before.
No, me neither.
You know, I just didn't know that was a thing.
Did they have like Trip NYC pants on and like Jinko jeans?
There was a lot of that, yeah. And so the younger kids that were there, I'm assuming, just sort of like Googled what people wore for new metal and kind of get. But there was definitely some holdover. Like, there was definitely some true believers.
Well, did you ever go to 80s night? Because that's exactly what this is.
No,
it's just dude, in Houston, 80s night was huge. You wanted cocaine or women? Go to 80s night. You're gonna get both.
Well, again, I see.
I hear
it's the same concept. The stuff you're
that's what I'm saying. It's the stuff you're
nostalgic for. Like, yeah. Because and I always thought, again, like, I was always like, do I really want to go to something like that? And I was like, oh no, this is exactly built for people like me to sort of, you know, it's kind of funky watching. Like, I was seeing the guy doing the DJ thing though. He's not like, he's not scratching the records or really blending.
No, they won't.
I don't know what the hell that guy does. Like he literally, I think he just presses play on a playlist and
Well,
goes like that over and
it's
over again.
like a DJ now is more or less doing curation.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's literally
Which
like you
is
said,
okay. I mean, if that's what they want to pay him to do, fine. I don't care. It doesn't bother me
like
any. But it is a little weird that they don't have albums anymore. Every punk place I go to, the DJ's got a box of 75s. I mean, 45s and a I almost said 7 inches and 45s, or I did mix the two words. They got a box of 45s and a box of 12-inch singles, and then they'll occasionally have like a small box of actual LPs. But yeah, it's always records, man.
yeah, singles over here. Whenever sometimes they'll put on the house speaker and just like shuffle a playlist. But at some of the other venues, whenever they got a DJ there, it's usually singles, and he's got the one Descendants single. He takes that off and he puts on the Dead
Yep.
Kennedys one, and I love waiting in the merch line whenever those guys are going, because it's just like
I like watching what they're playing, man.
it's always that very rootsy kind of stuff. It's always that very cornerstone stuff that pretty much everyone there, no matter what you're there to see, kind of knows that stuff. So it's good. It's a good like.
Well,
it's
you'll
a
get
good
a lot
uniting
of
thing.
incredibly important deep cuts through that kind of
Mhm.
activity. Like, I remember when I had my comic book shop, and I had just started getting back into vinyl after that flood or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And I had a fair amount of records in my store. I had this guy come in, and he's like, I knew him from shopping in my store, and he's like, "Hey, man, I got this thing I'm fixing to do, and I was wondering if you were interested in participating." And I had no idea what he meant. And he's like, "I'm looking for somebody to DJ some music, and I see that you got records in here. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, I don't have the DJ setup. I've got a record
Yeah.
player and a stereo and some really good speakers." And he's like, "Oh, no, I don't mean that you have to you can just play a record and then take it off, and there can be a couple of minutes of silence." I said, "What if I have an iPod hooked up, and then I play a record, and in between finding a new record, I have a playlist that I just pull the record off, hit play, switch to a different input, find a record, put it on. When that song ends, I switch back to my phono, and then I play the record." And he was like, "That would be perfect." And so I did that, and they actually paid me, dude. It was crazy, man. And it was cool because I went into this I don't know if you know where Katy, Texas is, but it is nothing but a bunch of white people. It's Trump country. And I don't know if you've met me before, but I didn't play popular music. I can tell you that. I was in there playing legitimate punk rock music, and it was awesome. I got a handful of weird looks, but most people were up there trying to buy shit from me. I sold a bunch of stuff up there. It was weird, man. I don't remember what the point of that was, but it was fun. Oh yeah, you're talking about DJs. Yeah, it's. I didn't. I for a small moment thought about maybe getting some gear together and looking for a place where I could go do that and be a guy that has I don't know. It's almost like a radio show, but in person.
Yeah, yeah.
You,
And there's a few like local guys. They're more like they're considered like party units. I mean, they're more for like younger people.
Yeah.
But they are like punk rock themed. I think it would be really cool if there was like an older circuit for that. If like some DJs would hit up like coffee shops and stuff, like that would
Dude,
be
there
actually
probably
pretty
is,
cool.
man.
It probably is like in a bigger city, or maybe I need
Portland?
to fill that role. Yeah, probably. You go to like breweries and stuff. We're getting Bad Cop at like just a local brewery here in like a week and a half.
Oh man, you should see this video. I just posted 3 live sets. A band called Strange Joy, one called Juice Box, and then one called Slugger out of California. And all 3 of those bands played at the Liberty and Justice. I'm sorry, it was Ryan from Liberty and Justice. His barbershop had his 9-year anniversary, and they played at a brewery, and the brewery was having an anniversary. It was packed, dude. Hundreds of kids going off on this hardcore show. And man, I'm telling you, if you get a chance to just kind of skip through and look at some of the individual little 1-minute clips of the video, dude, it was like a show from 2005, man. It was amazing. At a brewery. It was awesome, man. You'll probably have a lot of fun.
Now we
Bad Cop, that's crazy.
Yeah, because like it's funny because all the post-train is all at all the regular venues, so you think it's just going to be, but it's not.
Right.
It's actually it's at a which again they're not really like a headliner type. They would be a band that would more come with like Teenage Bottle Rocket or something like that. But so
they're like a co-headliner or a opener.
Yeah, so like I think a headline, maybe that's where they throw them as a head, but like that's like a fun night, like to be like.
I still like them though. They're a good band.
Oh, I think they're great, but going to like a more intimate venue like that, I'm probably gonna have my ears blown out. From
yeah, probably, almost certainly.
Yeah, see, I'm thinking about DJs now, and it's like there's another
So,
relic of the '90s, like when rock bands had DJs in them, and they
oh
were really
man, what
skilled as DJs.
another thing I'm glad that's over with. Man, the '90s were great, but dude, every pendulum swings back the other way, man, and it was also terrible.
Mm.
DJs and rock music, man, no thank you, dude. The fact that you could put in the same sentence Kid Rock, Crazy Town, let's see, Mest, Blink 182, Offspring, Green Day, Rancid. Yeah, you got there real quick. Oh, gross. Kid Rock to Rancid in like a sentence. Oh, oh. The '90s are killing me, bro. Oh, I definitely had the Kid Rock CD.
Oh, I used to. Yeah, I not only
Devil
had
Without a Cause.
that. No, that I would listen to the deep cuts too. Like, and even years after it had passed, I always kind of liked that. That album, and then the album he did in like 2001. I actually didn't hate that one either. The one that was more like a country toned album that he did like explicitly.
Okay, was it
before he changed his gimmick, basically when he was in the middle of that transitional. I always thought that had like a decent album of decent-ish country songs. Once he became just a cartoon character, though, as the decade wore on, you know, and you forget, like, first of all, dude, you ain't poor.
My name is Kid Rock. Oh my goodness, I hate that.
Yeah, and it's funny. What's funny to me is people probably don't realize his bass music was hip hop. He added in this other stuff.
Weird
that like people just have no cut that he was a legit, you know, guy who would do battle raps in the '80s in Detroit and all that. You know,
have you seen
recall that?
Have you seen a picture of him with his hair like standing up
the
on
Kid
end?
and Play? Yeah,
bro, it looks insane, and his nose looks like Flanders.
And it's so funny because he was totally a white suburb rapper dude with, like, you know, a rich dad, and then he saw a market inefficiency where he could be branded as a sort of like Hank Williams
dude, for real, it's
which you're
so
not.
weird.
And then it's just like it's been so inauthentic because he's nothing but reaction. So there's nothing authentic to any of his like little stands or anything like that. So it's just a topper kind of thing. It's pretty.
And it's funny to call them stands, seeing as that his mortal enemy is Eminem, where that came from. His name is actual Robert Ritchie.
Bobby.
What
Dick.
a weird, yeah. Oh wow. His name is Bob. No, Bob. Yeah. Oh wow, Bob Dick. Oh, that's awful, dude. No wonder he went with Kid Rock. I would have too. Okay, let's wrap things up
saw
here.
him live once. He did a Ramones cover.
Really?
Yeah, he worked in the Blitzkrieg Bop into like a whole section. Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. Oh man, that makes me sad. Dude, you ain't gotta do the Ramones like that. Well, okay, so before we get out of here, next week we're doing Op Ivy and Suicide Machines Destruction by Definition. I got this stupid gnarly ass hangnail that will not go away. I've been trying to fix it for the whole entire show and it just hurts. Okay, I did that video on the origins of street punk.
Mm-hmm.
This dude got on here and said, let me see if I can find this real quick. You're not going to believe this shit, dude. There's not a lot of things where I'm like, I won't say offended, but there's not a lot of times where I'm like blown away by somebody's insane stuff that they would say to me. And like, okay, let's see. Where's this at? Oh, come on. He basically said that, oh my goodness, I really want to read this out. Oh, here it goes. I cannot believe this guy, bro. He said, there is no street punk or street rock band that rivals Screwdriver. Bro, are you kidding me? I don't care who thinks otherwise. I don't care what you think of their politics. I'm not some 12-year-old kid trying to be edgy or controversial. This is my sober opinion. And then my response was, so what, you're a 36-year-old racist instead? Based solely on their politics, you're wrong. Their songs are full of gnarly hate, and I don't care how good the music is, quote unquote. That eliminates them from being considered. I don't care if you're trying to be edgy or not. It just sounds like you are. I'm not for censorship, and I believe we should be able to talk like adults, but I will absolutely not tolerate any talk of that band on my channel or in the comments. If you don't like it, I don't care. I hope you respect my platform, but if you don't, I'll just have to block you. Honestly, you just talking about them in a positive way is a huge red flag. It's disgusting, man. Be better. And then he got pissed off at me. But, like, I don't care about their first album. They're not known for their first album, you Nimrod. Like, what are we talking about? You know who that band is?
Yeah, the Nazi band, right?
That's exactly right. So, like, his point is like, yeah, but they made a good album in 77 before they were like that. That doesn't matter, bro. Like, it just simply doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. I'm sorry, but you went that direction and kept the same band name. So your early albums are guilty by association, my friend. Like, they can't be talked about. I'm not going to review them. I'll just block the guy. I don't care, man.
Yeah, I can't think of anything less punk rock than an openly fascist band. Like, that's
Thank you.
There's what's the line? There's the line. There you found it. Screwdriver is the line.
It's crazy. It's crazy, man. This guy, I'm about to just block the guy because, and then somebody else goes, Screwdriver were street punk pioneers, whether people like it or not. It doesn't matter. I'm not arguing whether they are or they not. I'm saying that I'm not going to cover them on the channel. And if you're talking about them in a positive light, I will just delete the comment and block you. I'm not going to give them any kind of publicity past like this little conversation at a 90-minute mark on a podcast to somebody that I'm friends with talking about. Like, this is it. I won't bring it up again. It's not. That's crazy that somebody would publicly, like, I don't know, announce admiration for a band like that. It's wild. Like, I just feel like that absolutely is you being edgy and stupid. Like,
yeah,
even if you have that record, don't tell people. Like, what are you doing, man?
Again, like we talked about earlier, a weird hill to die on. Oh, that's a weird hill to die on.
Very, very strange hill to die on. But I'm looking forward to the polar opposite of that with Operation Ivy next week. I can't freaking wait.
That's a good hill to die on.
That is a very good hill to die on. And on this note, we are out of here, folks. Thank you so much for your time. If you like the video, please let us know, man. Comment on it, like it, subscribe to the channel, listen to us on Spotify, all that stuff, man. We're rocking and rolling right now. Please go check out the Origins of Street Punk video I did. And otherwise, we'll talk to y'all next week, man. Stay tuned, folks. Peace.